Hafrsfjord is a fjord close to the city Stavanger in Rogaland County, Norway. Historically, Hafrsfjorden was principally known for its association with the Battle of Hafrsfjord. Harald Fairhair won a great naval battle during the year 872 according to the saga. The battle paved the way for Harald to gain control over most of the western coast of Norway. Harald Fairhair is presumably born in the year 854. Harald Halfdanson, or Harald Luava, as he was called in his younger days before he later got the more common name Harald Fairhair. His father was Halfdan the Black, who was a petty king among many others in the country. He probably descended from the old Swedish Yngling family from Uppsala in Sweden. The Yngling family is said to have gained dominion over a good part of Uppland before they found foothold in Vestfold. The young Harald Fairhair was sent to a foster father to be brought up. There was a man named Guttorm. He was Harald's uncle and he became his foster father. He served as his nephew's chief diplomat, guardian, and was the leader over his forces until Harald became 15. Harald was only 10 years old when he first came to the throne. His father Halfdan the Black drowned when he fell through the ice in Randsfjorden on his way back from Hadland. His horse-driven sleigh broke through the ice and he died shortly after falling into the frozen water. Europe was undergoing major political changes in the mid-850s, borders were shifted, and there was much political unrest. What exactly was the purpose of the military gathering, and the battle in Hafrsfjord? Was it about gaining control of the important traffic routes Nordveien and Vestveien, or the desire to unite Norway into one kingdom? Vestveien was the route west to Iceland, the Faroe Islands, Shetland, the Orkney Islands, Scotland, and Ireland, later also Greenland and Vinland, America. Harald came early to his grandfather in Son, where he was raised, and inherited the kingdom from his grandfather. Before the Battle of Hafrsfjord, he was clearly recognized as supreme king in large parts of western Norway. The battle was thus between Harald's opponents in Rogalandagder and Telemark, and a detachment of Danish and Irish elite soldiers. After the victory in Hafrsfjord, the losers had to recognize Harald as supreme king, and his kingdom now stretched from Rygarbit, the distinction between eastern and western Norway, the easternmost border point in the Skagerrak, approximately between today's Risør and Kragerø, to Nordfjord, the northern third of Sogn and Fjordane County. Harald was now strong enough to negotiate with those in power on the north side, namely the Earls of Moor and Lad. They came to an agreement and joined a kind of federation where Harald was recognized as supreme king. From just before 900, Harald has had supremacy over the entire coastal Norway from Hålogaland in the north, to Grenland, the county of Vestfold, and Telemark in the southeast. Vikings' naval battles were fought according to the same principles as battles on land. Most of their ships they towed them side by side to create a platform to form a screened wall. The attackers tried to storm this platform, such as in the Battle of Hafrsfjord. Ship after ship was taken and then detached from the formation to drift away. Both fleets used to keep some ships outside the formation to maneuver. These were used to attack the enemy by walking beside and boarding the vessel faced with a hailstorm of arrows, rocks, and spears from both sides. If the defenders succeeded in killing the attacking rowers, or if the oars of the attacking ship were destroyed, the attack often failed due to the inability to maneuver the vessel. Most sea battles took place in calm waters or estuaries. They were carefully selected. It was impossible to fight in the open sea with this strategy. When fighting large battles with each other, they were always played out in places that were militarily strategically topographical. They did their utmost to ensure that a naval action was as much like a land battle as possible, arranging their fleets in lines or wedges with one side of the ship, or sometimes both, usually towing together the largest of their ships side by side, to form large floating platforms. The largest and best manned ships usually formed the middle part of the line, with the command ship, the royal ships, always located in the center since they usually had the largest vessel of all. The bow of the longer ships stretched out in front of the battle line, and some of them called bardi, were armored with iron plates forward and aft, which carried the weight of the battles. Some even had a series of iron spikes called beards around the bow, designed to prevent enemy ships that dared to get close enough to board. In addition to this floating platform, there were usually a number of extra individual ships placed on the flanks and rear, whose tasks were to pull with the opposite numbers to attack the enemy's platform if he had one, and put reinforcements on board his own platform when needed, and to pursue the enemy in flight. The masts were lowered in battle, and all movement was maneuvering with the oars, so the loss of the ship's oars in collision with another vessel weakened it effectively. Nevertheless, it does not appear that the classic Diacephalus maneuver, which involved cutting off the oars of an enemy vessel prior to its own ship, had been used deliberately. The main naval tactic was simply to row against the enemy ship, attack and board it, bring hand weapons before moving on to another vessel, sometimes cutting the cleared ship loose if it formed the wing on a platform. The platforms were attacked by as many ships as could pull along. When fronting and boarding the enemy vessel, they were usually met in front of a shower of arrows, at a closer distance, spears, iron balls and stones, as a result of which each rower was often protected by another man, who averted the arrows with the shield. In the final approach before boarding, shields were held over the rowers' heads so tightly that no parts of their bodies were exposed. Some ships had extra supplies of rocks or stones and other throwing weapons. Is to a large extent registered in accounts of Viking naval battles, and was clearly the favorite form of throwing weapon. The largest were dropped from high-sided vessels and could even pass through the decks of the enemy ship, which could give fatal results. The front warriors was the feared berserkers. Viking berserkers were fierce warriors who are said to have fought in a trance-like rage and were possessed by uncontrollable destructive power. The berserkers, who was also called the wolfskins, were skilled and dangerous warriors associated with the god Odin. They were a brotherhood of warriors who served a common master. They were the most effective and important warriors for the Viking kings. They developed into a noble elite in the Viking Age and long after. Viking warriors worshipped the god Odin to give them aggression and courage in battle, but the berserkers took this a step further. According to the sources, they could possess innumerable forces, and when they attacked, they howled like mad dogs or wolves. It was said that neither iron nor fire could harm them, and they felt no pain. After a fight, they were as weak as infants, totally used both physically and mentally. Originally, berserkers developed their own fraternity of professional warriors who traveled and served various kings and chiefs home and abroad. What set them apart was that they had bears and wolves as totem animals, and dressed in the skins. Whether it was a bear or a wolf, the warriors believed that they were endowed with the spirit of the beast. The reason they called these front warriors berserkers was that they had special rituals before going into battle. They went into a kind of self-inflicted hypnosis trance. In this state they weakened state of consciousness when they went into battle, and which are then corrected unconsciously. There are also theories that they ingested mushroom like fly agaric or fly amanita, that supposedly gave them the stimuli they needed. People in this condition seem distant, have low awareness of the environment and have reduced pain threshold. The trance gave them increased muscle strength. Critical thinking and normal social inhibitions are weakened, but those affected themselves are not unconscious. In other words, they fear nothing, and seem incredibly intimidating to their opponents. In battles, they were put in front of or in a rectangular mass, military formation, usually composed of heavy infantry to withstand the main force of an attack, or in front, when launching an attack. One of the problems with berserkers is that they had difficulty keeping the formation line, but preferred to operate in small groups and attack independently. In naval battles, there were usually 12 berserker in each ship. The Great Battle of Hafrsfjord was the greatest military sea battle in the Scandinavian history. Probably more than 2,000 warriors were killed by Harald's great naval army, which consisted presumably of 150 ships and about 5,500 warriors. When the Allies' fleet of 100 ships and 5,000 men against Harald Fairhair realized that the battle was over, and most of their leaders had fell, they started to fled from Harald's warriors, but they blocked the entrance of Hafrsfjord and some probably escaped to the nearest island or land. There are also a small river called Moelbekken, which connecting Hafrsfjord with Stavanger, and Holland's Vanet Vikingbekken, which led to the open coastline. This could have been an escape possibility for many. Today this river is small and narrow, but back then it was possible to go with smaller boats through and reach the open sea. Many large and wealthy farmers, especially from western Norway, which was against King Harald's heavy taxation, left their properties. They sailed to Iceland, which had been discovered by some Vikings not so long ago. There were also several who traveled to the Scottish Islands, many of whom had friends and family there. From there they kept unrest with King Harald, and ravaged his kingdom. Finally, King Harald gathered a large army, and sailed to the Scottish Islands, chased the Vikings, and left Shetland, Orkney, and Hebrides and probably the Faroe Islands under the Norwegian kingdom, where he deployed earls. Shortly afterwards, the Vikings in Scotland were driven out by the native people there, and large numbers of these made their way to Iceland. In the years 886 to 900, at least 400 large farmers and their retinue emigrated from Norway to Iceland. Before the death of King Harald Fairhair, the number of emigrants to Iceland was up to approximate 25,000 people, mostly from western Norway, which was a big loss for Norway. King Harald Fairhair also demanded taxes from the Finn Sami people in Finnmark, and Kola, which belonged to Russia, and all the way to the White Sea, which was a Norwegian tax country. When King Harald was approximate 80 years old, around 930, he gave control of the Norwegian kingdom to his son Erik Blood Axe. It is only after Norway has been unified that the permanent presence of Norsemen is established in Finnmark, the borderland between Norse settlement or trading posts in the far north and the indigenous Sami tribes. The Norse sagas state that the new Norwegian monarchy imposes tribute on the Finnmark. It remains unoccupied by Norsemen to any great or permanent extent, but royal agents are appointed to collect the tribute from the region's Finno-Ugric tribes. Harald's political power was probably limited to western and southwestern Norway. Further north, the powerful Jarls of Lade, today's Trondelag, submitted to his power only in name, while the lands around the Hafrsfjord Viking were controlled by the powerful Danish kings. Harald's victory in Hafrsfjord was only the beginning of unifying Norway into one kingdom. What he gained was that he got rid of all the small kings in the country and deployed trusted earls instead to collect tribute. The earls got 1/3 of the tribute. Harald enforced his power ruthlessly, but was fair to his most trusted men. King Harald Fairhair Havdansson died in 933. He was the ruling king of Norway for more than 60 years, and was the longest-serving king in the Norwegian history.